Most people think they struggle with vocab questions because they have a bad vocabulary, but actually, most of the time it's because the process that they use to solve vocab questions sucks. The best way to solve vocab questions that I found is to come up with a synonym of what the answer should be before you look at the answer choices. And that way you can just look for the answer choices to see which best matches the synonym that you came up with. And your synonym shouldn't be the first thing that comes to your mind when you read the passage. You have to find direct evidence for the synonym. And there's always going to be this direct evidence in the passage that gives away what the answer is. There's either going to be a synonym in the passage itself, there might be a demonstration of what the synonym should be, or if you just follow the logic of the passage itself, you should be able to get a really good idea of what the synonym should be. So for example, let's look at this passage. While scholars believe many Mesoamerican cities influence each other, so cities influence each other, direct evidence of this influence is difficult to get. So I'm assuming the rest of the passage is going to talk about getting this evidence, at least that just makes sense. However, recent excavations of a sector of this place unearthed a citadel, I think, that shows something of architecture. So I'm assuming the influence of that there'll be, because this, we're trying to prove this influence between cities, right? And this shows influence of this. So it makes sense. It makes logical sense given the first sentence that this blank would show influence of and architecture, including a new replica. So this is actually an example of this word, right? That shows something of architecture, and this is including new replica. So it's an example. So the answer we're looking for, I already have an idea. I'm thinking the synonym we need to look for is the synonym to the show that shows influence of. So influence of, but also a new replica should be an example of this word as well. Okay, providing tangible evidence of outside influence again in portion. So evidence, so something that provides evidence of influence. Okay, and then the new replica is an example of that. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's actually influence itself, but something that would show evidence of influence. So now I'm thinking something to do with copycats that shows, I know it's probably not going to be the answer directly, but that shows copycats of this architecture. Something to do, that's just the first thing that came to my mind. But I'm looking for something to do with copycats, so a synonym of copycats of. Okay, so we look for the answer choices. Refinements of, I don't think that fits. Precursors of, I think pre is like something that happens before, but that's definitely not a synonym to copycat. Like commonalities with, yeah, that's obviously C. Commonalities, obviously copycats, that fits perfectly. And animosities, I think that's negatives towards. Okay, but you can see that's pretty obvious. This makes it extremely obvious what the answer is for sure. So you have to understand the passage perfectly. You have to prioritize understanding the passage. If you don't understand the passage, there's no safety net. Unlike other reading comprehension questions where there's tons of words that you can verify to make sure every single word fits according to the passage. For vocab questions, if you misunderstand the passage, you're screwed. You're going to get the question wrong because there's only one word to help you get what the answer is. There's no safety nets to catch yourself. So your top priority in vocab questions is you have to understand the passage perfectly. And your goal when you're reading the passage is to find what I like to call the equivalent idea, or basically a synonym or demonstration or something in the passage that gives away what the answer is, or gives away what the word of the blank should be. And you notice new replica here is in between dashes. This is what I like to call unusual punctuation. Basically anything that's not standard punctuation, like commas and periods. If you see those, for example, colons, semicolons, even if there's commas, but there's like tons of commas right next to each other, around there is going to be what best gives away what the synonym to the answer should be. Because on the SAT, there has to be only one right answer choice. There can never be debate over what the right answer is. And the only way that they can make sure that there's always a clear, correct answer is they put evidence for what the answer should be in the text somewhere. So they have to put this kind of synonym or an example or something that gives away what the answer is in the passage somewhere. And the easiest way for them to do that is to literally put unusual punctuation like dashes or a colon to give an example or some kind of demonstration of what the answer should be. So when you're reading, you should pay close attention to the entire passage, obviously, but especially around the unusual punctuation like dashes, colons, or semicolons. That would definitely give away what the answer should be. And I know this question might have been on the easier side for a lot of you. So let's go to an example where the answer choices are extremely hard to figure out, but you can still use this strategy to solve those. Okay, so let's do this question. Difficulties of documenting nocturnal visits. I'm assuming it's difficult because it's nocturnal, so it happens at night. And a general focus on, so they're focusing specifically on these pollinators, such as these things, have resulted in very little of, so a small amount of information. And that doesn't make logical sense because it says difficulties. So if it's difficult to document this, obviously it makes sense that they didn't document much because it was difficult, right? So it resulted in a small amount of information on nocturnal moth pollinators, such as pollination of plants, such as this thing. Okay. Aggregate. Honestly, I don't know what aggregate means, but Max Anderson have addressed this by utilizing infrared. So they fixed this problem of having small information by using this technology. But I guess this could kind of give away what the answer is. But I think definitely difficulties, right? This is definitely what, because if they have difficulty documenting something, obviously then that they wouldn't be able to document much. So this is kind of a synonym, or at least something that definitely gives away what the answer is. So you can see you have to understand the logic of the passage, and there would be something that clearly gives away what the answer is. So again, our synonym that we have in mind for what the answer is a small amount of. And then we need to look for a synonym just a small amount of in the answer choices. Now, if we look at these answer choices, this looks really hard. In abatement and aggregation, I don't know what these three means, but if I'm looking for a synonym, if I had to pick a synonym for a small amount of, I would pick a dose. Because I don't know why, it just sounds like something that would be a synonym to a small amount of. And dissonance, I kind of know what dissonance means, but like these two, I couldn't even tell you what the definition of these two is, honestly. I think abatement's a negative thing. Aggregation is probably neutral. You could use like the context or the connotation of what the word is, but the best strategy is always come up with a synonym for what the answer should be, and then you just look through the answer choice. And answer choice C is actually the answer here. Now, this last part where you have the answer in your head, and you just need to look through the answer choices to figure out which one best matches the answer in your head, most of the time you will be able to get the answer. However, there are some times where there's just too many words you don't know, and you're not good enough at guessing to get the correct answer. This is where some super targeted practice on the very last step of the vocab process might come in handy, where you just have your own answer in your head and you need to pick the answer choice. And I think the best way to practice this last step in the process is just through Quizlet. So I have a link to this in the pinned comment below this video, but you just use this Quizlet. You can really use any type of Quizlet that has something to do with the most common SAT vocab words, but just make sure that the definition doesn't have an example of what the word is, because you don't want the definition to give away what the answer is, basically. And you can click on Learn once you load Quizlet. You might need to make an account if you don't have an account already. But click on Learn, let's memorize it all, and start Learn. And then you can click on the gear symbol, shuffle the questions, if it isn't already shuffled, and turn off everything except for multiple choice. You only want multiple choice, and also view all options, and you only want the answer with the turn, not the definition. So click answer with, and turn off answering with definition, which is already turned off for me, but make sure this is turned off. And then press save. And now this is a perfect replication of the last step of the vocab process, where you know what you're looking for, and you just need to pick which answer choice best fits what you're looking for, right? So to embarrass or confuse. I have no idea. To fluster, probably discomfit. Discomfit. That's my guess. Oh, I got it right. Okay. Quickly fading or disappearing. Um, a short-lived. Probably fading makes me think of fallacious. I think this is probably like volatile or not volatile. Yeah. And for this, sure, I got it wrong. Okay, but usually this is I even got this question wrong. Like I genuinely didn't know what the answer was. These are all really hard, and this lets you practice that last step of guessing what the answer is. And there's literally over 1,000 of these I can do. And when you shuffle them again, you pretty much get brand new questions. So there's pretty much unlimited practice for this last step. The one problem is, after you do 14 questions, it's not going to be free anymore. Quizlet made Learn not free anymore, so you can just do a 30-day free trial. I think it's 30 days. That might be worth it, but what I would do is just restart the Learn after it makes me pay for it. So after you do 14, just click view all options again and just restart the Learn. And you just restart it and just shuffle all over again. And you just get a brand new 14 new questions if you want to. I know this is a bit scuffed, but this is the best free way I found to practice this. And this is super helpful because not only do you get exposure to all the really hard common SAT vocab words that show up over and over again on the SAT, but you also develop the meta skill of guessing what the answer is, harsh or abusive. And then you get the meta skill of figuring out what the answer is just from the answer you're looking for. And as you get good at these, you'll get really good at guessing what the answer is. And for those of you in my paid program, which is the first link in the description, in the software I built, there's also targeted practice just for this, specifically designed for the SAT. And also you'll be able to view your progress for all the sessions, how much time you took, as well as your mastery of the words that you did. And before you guys ask in the comments, I don't recommend you going into a common SAT vocab list and memorizing the words individually like this with determinate definitions using flashcards or something like that. Because first of all, it's super boring. And my practice is way more fun when you're just picking through the answer choices in multiple choice mode. But also, it doesn't help much. It's better to practice the skill of guessing the answer because when you memorize all 1,000 of these words, there's still a really good chance that you won't even see any of these words during the test, just because of how many vocab words there are that College Board can pick from. The best way to get good at something is to just keep on doing that something until you get good at it. So I would just keep on practicing the last part of the process where you're just guessing what the answer is. That's the better skill to develop. You want to develop the meta skill of guessing rather than just memorize these words overall. Because even if you don't know what the word means, as long as you can get the answer correct, that's all that matters. I also don't recommend you memorizing roots and prefixes and suffixes. At least most of these lists suck, in my opinion. It's like, when would alb ever be useful to memorize? And when you try to memorize these specifically, it's literally just better to just memorize the words. Because you memorize the words, you can tell, okay, this sounds like albino, so it probably means something to do with white, right? There's also lots of other reasons why I don't think memorizing common prefixes, roots, and suffixes help. The only prefixes that I would recommend you memorize is a list of all the prefixes that mean not. So, when you put in front of something, it means not. Or like when you put moral, it means not moral. Right? These might be useful. So these are the only things that I'll memorize. And I'll link this in the pinned comment as well. But I can make a whole entire video on just why you shouldn't memorize all of these. But overall, I just haven't seen good improvement for my students when they memorize all this. It's just a lot of work for little benefit. It's much better to just practice getting the meta skill of guessing what the answer is and getting exposure to the common words that show up on the SAT.